to jump right in. The definition that we're going to use this afternoon for emotional intelligence is this: the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Now that sort of sounds like be wise, be sensible, be well advised. But Carol and Kathy, what does this really mean? What is this EQET?
Well, I like to boil things down really simple. I'm a simple person. How many of you know what your 7 emotions are? Well, let's start there. How about love, fear, hate, anger, joy, sadness, and envy? Those are all emotions that we feel every day. And if you're going to have a high emotional intelligence, you're going to have to know how to control those, right? Now I want to throw another point on that. 5 of those are negative. And so we want to start there. And then there's 5 dimensions that you need to build on to have maturity, and each one builds on the other. Self-awareness, we have to be aware, first of all, on how we impact others. Self-regulation, we have to know how to regulate that. And then that moves us into motivation, how we motivate others. And then empathy, the ability to understand. And finally, the last dimension is interpersonal skills, which basically is leadership and influencing others. Each one of those are built on the other.
Kathy, now take us a little bit further with this in terms of who is this about?
Who is it not about? I think Dr. Ben stole our thunder when she said that you get more flies with honey. I thought that's emotional intelligence.
Yes.
So when you go from that, and don't you dare ask what year it was, but when I started my career, this would never have been talked about. You never spoke of emotion in the workplace. If someone didn't treat you appropriately, we just accepted, oh, that's just the way they are. That doesn't work anymore. People are actually hired for their IQ. They're hired for what they know, their IQ. People are fired for who they are, which comes out in your EQ. So this is really important. There was a recent Harvard study that showed 95% of the traits of a leader, their success is based on emotional intelligence. So this is really good stuff.
And just to add to that, Sherry talked to you about Daniel Goleman, who is the expert. He says that 90% of the success in senior leadership is based on the high emotional intelligence.
You know, you think about this emotional intelligence. Is it about you? Is it about the way you treat others? Kathy, is it different for men and women? Let's get that out of the way.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, especially with a room full of women primarily. I knew this in my gut. When we were sitting around talking, it was very obvious that we knew that women were better in this one category than men, but we couldn't prove it. I'm a high C, a very anal person, so I did a little research. And what I found out, that it is a proven fact, there is a part of our brain, and I have the pictures to show it. There's a part of our brain that, there's multiple parts. One is the primal area. Animals have it, males, females, we all have it. The primal instinct, when you hear something, is it going to kill me? So for men, when they hear a noise, their first reaction, is it going to kill me? And as soon as they realize it's not going to kill them, they forget it, put it out of their mind, it's gone. Women, on the other side, have a different part of the brain, and if they hear a noise, yes, they too say, is it going to kill me? But as soon as they realize it isn't, they say, oh, but I might need to know this one day, so we store it. And that's where the emotional intelligence comes from.
Now, you didn't know what you had stored, did you? Now, I want to ask you one more question, and then I want to ask Debbie and Susan about some of the practicality of the things that we're talking about. What I think I'm hearing you all say is that it is about you as an individual but it is also about the people that you're dealing with. Carol?
Well, I learned a long time ago, it's really not about me. And if I can make it not about me and make it about the other people that either I work with or I'm in the room with, and I have to tell you, I fell forward a lot of times in management learning that you need to listen with your eyes too and with your ears. And I think it was Martha, you said when someone's not saying something, you know, they probably have more to say, but we're not giving them a chance to say it. And I can say that when you learn that it's not about you, you're a lot better off because you're listening and you're really in tune to the other things around you.
But Kathy, don't you really have to know yourself too, don't you?
Self-awareness is probably one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. And there are profiles out there, there's training you can go through and everything else. The importance of knowing ourselves is one piece of it. But to be successful, we have to learn to adapt. I love the Bible, I love the golden rule, but I have a different version of it for business. I need to treat you the way you want to be treated, not the way I want to be treated. So when I speak to you, I have a favorite word. I don't know if it's real or if I made it up, but it's carefrontation. If I care enough to confront the issues and discuss it with you. So we have to learn to adapt so that someone else will hear our message.
Debbie and Susan, you're smiling over there, and I know you're thinking about practical experiences either you have had or that people that work with you have had. And I'd like for you to share some of those emotionally, can't even think what we're about to say, the core competency of emotional intelligence in its day-to-day practicality. How's it worked? How hasn't it worked? And you were telling us a great story today. Even if you don't think it fits, tell it.
Okay, I'll tell it. This is probably a good one on self-regulation and self-awareness. As Carol was mentioning, I was telling them the story, and actually there's a few of my team members out in the audience, and some of them probably have heard me tell this before. Many years ago in my career, I've been with Navy Federal for 22 years, and many, many years ago, my boss at the time, who is now our COO and still my boss, came to my office one day and said, I had been running the contact center for 2 years. We had just put together 5 contact centers under one. We were starting to have fun. We were going to be doing some really cool stuff, and I finally felt like we were going to kind of reap the rewards of all of the things we'd built over the last 2 years. And he came in my office, real serious, and he said, Debbie, I need you to do something for me. And I said, sure, John, what do you need me to do? And he said, I need you to go to collections. And I said, what? And he said, I need you to go to collections. He said, because it's a mess, and I need you to go down there and fix it. Well, I was really irritated. And instead of being aware of what I was getting ready to say to my boss, I said, well, I don't want to do that. And he said, well, I really don't care what you want to do. That's what you're going to do because that's what Navy Federal needs you to do. And so that's what you need to do. So this was a Thursday, and I said, when do I start? And he said, Monday. And I was in shock. Went home, of course, I called my dad. I used to talk to my dad and got a lot of good advice from him. And I told him, and he said, let me tell you something. He said, you take the weekend, you feel sorry for yourself, you have your own little pity party. He said, come Monday, you better walk in that door, and you better make every single one of those employees feel like they are the best thing that ever happened to you, and you feel like you are working in the best place in the world because they need you right now, and you better stop thinking about yourself. So that was a really good exercise in emotional intelligence for me.
I would have liked that.
Susan, how about you? We've had some sidebar conversations, and you've talked about some of the things that you do to prepare yourself when you get into situations. And just elaborate on this in either experiences or tidbits, if you would, please.
You know, throughout the day you've heard, know who your audience is. In a sense, it's know who your customer is. In my world, my customer really is my supervisor, my managers. That's my customer. And so I have to know who my customer is, one, so I can talk to him, and two, so I can sort of relate to what it is they're going through day in and day out. But you guys are sitting out there seeing us how we are now. We didn't get here easily. So when I've got to know my customer, I've got to bring in that emotional intelligence. And sometimes that's just your gut, but your gut is all of those experiences that you've had up to this point that get you there. So when they say go with your gut, because your gut, it is all those experiences that came out from here. And then to know who your customer is and on what level you've got to talk to them. It is not what you say, it's how you say it.
It's been said that you really should listen with your eyes. What does that really mean?
In communication, only 7% of communication are the words we speak. I heard an example. I can tell if I'm watching somebody play ball and he hits it, I can say, Ted, way to go. Or I can say, Ted, way to go. So the tone of your voice, the body language you use, the expressions that you use, they speak so much louder than the words we say. So always be cognizant of all of those pieces.
Carol, did you want to add to that?
Well, we have a gift that we don't take advantage of, and that is there's 4 behavioral styles. And if you don't know what those 4 styles are and what you are, you can't really, if you don't understand yourself, how are you going to understand others around you? And I always say it's not what style you are, it's what you do with your style. And, I'm a person that fails forward, and I'll tell you, when I've gotten sideways and I've made mistakes, it's when I didn't pay attention with my eyes. And I wasn't watching the cues and the body language, and I was delivering things in the wrong manner. So it's a gift I think we can all learn.
Let me ask you, did you want to add to that, Susan? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, she did an excellent job. When I said it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And when you say you have to look with your eyes is all that experience. It's knowing who your customer is, looking at that body language and reading it, and then adjusting accordingly on how you're talking or how you're communicating to what you are seeing tells you.
Debbie, the story you have just given us has to do with change that was imposed on you. Now, I'm sure if I ask everybody out here, what do you prefer, change that you make or change that's imposed on you, everybody would say, I want to make my own bloody change. However, when change is made for you, how in dealing with all that, did you grab onto your emotional intelligence, move that forward for you, and give us an example of how you have seen someone who's had change imposed on them and not dealt with it very well? And could you see what was happening with their emotional intelligence or not happening?
Well, I think for me, I had some big takeaways from that experience. First of all, learning how to react a little better when my boss came to me and realizing it wasn't just about me, it was about the organization and what was best for Navy Federal. And the fact that that experience was one of the best experiences I have ever had in a leadership role, because we couldn't have gone any farther to the bottom where we were at that point in time, and we were only going to go up. And it was a huge team effort. So I don't think the employees realized at the time, but I got more out of that than they did. And it helped shape me for the future. And I've seen people over time make that similar mistake that I made. And honestly, for me, I think having that experience myself makes it easier for me to say, hey, been there, done that. I think as a leader, if you can be, as Debbie said in the last panel, authentic in your approach with people, and you're not afraid to share your story, whether that's a bad story, a bad experience that you had because you imposed that on yourself. Yeah, change was imposed on me, but I could have certainly handled that a lot better than I did, and I learned from that. And I have seen my folks over the years, have the same experience. At Navy Federal, we are very much groomed to work in all different facets of the organization. I think it's part of what makes our culture strong. But with that comes a lot of change that is imposed upon people, and some are more adaptable than others. And I think that that's really important, to embrace change when it's imposed on you and look at what are the positives you're going to get out of that as opposed to the negatives.
Susan, in training a lot of the people that work in your business, how do you help those who really want to, and I don't mean not be a team player, but they want to work in isolation, versus having to work with a lot of people. How do you help them understand and learn that here's the way you work in a group?
First of all, you have to really explain to them what team means. If you bring a violinist out and you hear their music, and you bring out the second one and the third, and before you know it, you have the entire orchestra out there working together, what a different sound you hear. When you're the single violinist, do you have impact? Yes. But are you as impactful as that entire orchestra? So you kind of have to paint that picture in their mind of what it means to be the team leader, what it means to be the team player, and you have to figure out how they need that communicated to them. You often have to paint that story, that picture in their mind. And then also be willing to say to them, when you tell them something to do, have them repeat it back to you. Do you know perception is not always the same when we're even communicating? And we think we've got our point across. Try having them repeat it back to you, and you will be surprised sometimes of the message.
Carol, I know you're dying to add to that.
Well, one of my mentors is here today, and just one little thing that she implemented when she came to Sacred Heart, and that was state your intent. State your intention at every meeting, at every beginning of a conversation is powerful. When you state your intent, it really, kind of diffuses a lot of things. So I think that is a real good thing to follow, and it's made a big difference, I know, in our communication at the hospital.
You've talked about love, fear, hate, anger, joy, energy, and one I can't read now. Anyway, out of all of those, what do you think is the most difficult for you all to use? I'll ask each one of you separately. What do you have the most difficult time conquering?
Well, I'll start. It depends on how much sleep I've had. You think of those 5 negative emotions. You have to self-regulate and kind of do a check-in with yourself on a regular basis, right? Is my water clear or is it cloudy? I really think you have to work on all of them depending on, the circumstance that you're in. Now, a quick example, when I was in banking, I was told that I would never be a president by an individual, just one individual. But I remember how I felt that day, and I remember I left angry. But then later, I self-regulated my emotions to that. I put reason to it, and I thought, wow, he sees me differently than I see myself. So I changed the whole dynamic.
Susan, do you have a notion around that?
I'm thinking of those emotions, and they run rampant in us every single minute of the day. You ought to be up here and see what that fear does for you. But fear you kind of overcome by doing, and when you say you're the shy person, you do those little baby steps at a time, and you do reach out to that one person and then that second person. But I would have to say in leadership, and sometimes it's joy that I'm concerned about, because am I entitled to have this much fun? Am I entitled to feel this way? Am I entitled to be in front of all of you people as a leader? So you sometimes you downplay, the joy aspect for fear of losing it.
I'm so glad you said that, because that also speaks to building on your strengths versus building on your weaknesses. You don't have to know everything, right? But you better find somebody that does know it if you don't know it, right?
It's surround yourself with people that are smarter than you are, because it makes you look better.
That's Debbie, tell us a little bit.
May I answer the question you had
certainly
asked?
may.
And the reason you triggered something in me. My favorite line, and it's what has made me successful by whatever definition I am, is learn to do it afraid. I want to comment because as we listen to the other panelists and even some people here today, you've heard people speak of a great childhood, wonderful parents, all these things. I just want to let you know it's not that way for all of us, and it may not be that way for all of you. So while some of us may not have been given confidence as we were coming up, I just have to encourage you to learn to do it afraid.
And I think what you've just calmed us all down to see is that everybody in this room is alike, and yet everybody in this room is different. And it's really important for you to know that. Give me an example, Debbie, of a time when you were so motivated to do something that you really had to harness your emotional intelligence because you couldn't move too fast because it would overwhelm everybody, or maybe you were not moving fast enough.
Well, I'll probably go back to the previous story I was talking about, getting into that role, and it's an area where I had worked previously, so I was familiar with it, but this was a different level now. And getting in there and seeing very quickly some of the challenges and major issues that were going on, and not always being the most patient person in the world, wanting to just move full steam ahead and start fixing that stuff, but then stopping myself and realizing, wait a minute, these guys have been going through this for the last several years. I need to get them involved. I need to get them to tell me the things that they need to see that needs to be changed because they've been living it. I haven't been living it. And once I did that, it just automatically slowed me down. First of all, the ideas I had were nothing compared to what my team had. I mean, and it has led me to a point now in my career where the best things that I ever do in my job every day is when I have an opportunity to talk to an employee and I learn something from them every day. I have employee forums. I do all these but those are the things that I love because I find more out. They're on the front lines every day. They understand how we should treat our members and what we should do, and they also, I need them to tell me what obstacles I need to remove for them to be successful. So in that example, it was stopping myself from moving too far ahead too quickly in solving a problem where actually my solution was not nearly as good as what my team came up with.
Thank you. Carol, talk a little more about this empathy piece.
Well, that's the level, that's the fourth level. We have to have the ability to put ourselves in the position of the person sitting in front of us, right, or the group, to be able to see things through the eyes of others. And I think that's very important because when you move to that level, then you're able to develop those interpersonal relationships that you need to have in order to have the ability to work together as a team. So I think empathy, again, remember they're building blocks. We build, one builds on the other, and empathy is that fourth level that we really need to see things through the eyes of others and be able to feel what someone else might be feeling in a particular situation.
Susan, you have such a variety of people that you train. How do you find this? How do you see this? How do you capture this type of empathy with them in order to be able to direct them differently?
First of all, you don't put people in a position to fail. And so you make sure that you've given them the tools, you've given them the training, and the time to do what it is that they're supposed to do. So if you work your way up the ladder into the leadership role, and let's say you're a store manager, by then you have actually experienced everything that the people that you're dealing with that have experienced. So you know how to talk to them, you know how to get them motivated and work with them. And so I would say if you have change in your life and you have an opportunity to do all these other things, it is preparing you for something in the future. I've had lots of things in my life that have prepared me for this role that I have, and to deal with 350 employees, 50 members of management, and 350 different personalities. So accept that change.
Thank you very much. I think it's time for us to start to take questions from the floor. So we'd ask you to come to the microphone down front and begin to ask your questions, and we'll gather the cards from the audience to have more questions for this panel.
Instead of writing this all out. If we haven't, my first question is, I was going to write down is, are you all going to also give us a reading list?
Yes.
That would be great, thank you. And secondly, for those of us who haven't done as much research about, we trust our guts, but when you're going down those lists and you're dealing with people that are, you haven't quite figured out yet and are uncooperative, how do you bridge that gap to not losing your temper, but to make people feel part of a team in a crash course kind of way? Thank you.
Anybody who wants to take that?
I don't know if this is going to answer it exactly, but in addition to the role I have at IMS, I'm a Vistage chair. So I have 20 CEOs that I coach on a regular basis. The hardest thing for me to learn, which is critical, is to ask questions. It is so easy for me. Of course I know their answer. I can tell them exactly what they need to do. But that doesn't get us anywhere. When you can ask the right questions and lead people to the conclusion themselves, then you're going to know you've won.
And Kathy's so right. You know, the answer is always within each and every one of us, but sometimes we don't take the time to ask those deep questions. We're always trying to get to the next task, right? Some of us, those of us that move faster than others. But I think taking the time to really ask the questions and find out what's behind that emotion, what's driving that, makes a huge difference.
All right. Here's a question for you, Susan and Debbie. Here's a question for you, Susan and Debbie, and the rest of you to hear. It's a secret. How can team playing improve emotional intelligence?
Well, I would say first, learning from somebody else that's going to have a different perspective on how to solve a problem or how to approach an issue is going to just expand your horizons and make you more open-minded. You know, some people, as you said, aren't comfortable in playing in a team, and my approach has always been we have to be collaborative. We are too big in our organization to not play well in the sandbox together. If we don't do that and understand that we need each other to accomplish serving our members and taking care of our team members, then we are not going to be successful. So it's an imperative, you know, in our business, and that's all I have to say.
Team is something that you kind of learn kind of the hard way along the way, and because so often sometimes we just want to take charge and do it all. But again, when you can step back and learn from others, so I would say you make sure that you have, like in my case, I have what's called rap sessions. And when you have a rap session, you sign up for it. Everything that is said in that meeting stays in that meeting. So we can be as open and honest and learn from each other and learn what our opportunities are and learn, you know, really what some of our good stuff is too. And when they do that, when they open up, when you start getting them away from their leadership, the people that they directly report to, and just get to a nice little rap session and open up, you'll be surprised the difference that it makes.
Thank you. What behavior, or is there one behavior that you need to be a good team player?
Again, I think it's a combination of all 5 of those dimensions that I just talked about adds into being a team player. Am I aware of those around me, how I'm impacting them? Can I regulate that? Am I showing empathy? Am I, connecting? I think it's a combination. I don't think there's just one. I think it's all of those together that really takes you to the top.
Carol was also sharing that there are 4 different behavior styles. It would be a very dull world if we were all alike. If you all are on a team and you're all alike, that team is probably not going to be as successful as it will be if you get the different types of people to work together.
And that leads you to the fact that you're going to all have the same kind of idea, and so you won't be creative. You'll all maybe want to do the same thing, right? All right. What is the relative effectiveness of extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation?
That sounds like a Carol question to me.
Well, well, I think you can make extrinsic, intrinsic. Well, internal. What's my why? What drives me? What really makes me passionate? And Dr. Benz, wow, was her why deep? And then that external, really looking at how do I impact the rest of the world? How do I connect with each one of you? So that's the way I would look at that.
Powerful women can be or appear to be intimidating. How do you overcome this and still project a strong, powerful image?
I find what I have to do is I have to adjust my voice level. It's so simplistic, and in adjusting my voice level, I also adjust how I'm approaching them. So right off the bat, they know you're the leader. They know you're the one in charge. But the key is, can I engage them? Can I get them to do what it is I want them to do?
I tell everybody that works with me, there are 2 words that start with B, and you can't call me either one. I don't want to be your boss. There is a military term, and I'm not military, but I heard a speaker recently, and he used a term, first among equals. So yes, it may be my job to be in charge, but we are really all equal. So maybe it is my turn today. But just never lose sight of that. We all are the same. And I love my favorite phrase, and Carol stole it, is I love, and I use it all the time, it is not about me. If it ever becomes about me, then we all have a problem. So just keep your ego in check.
That's a very good point about keeping the ego in check, but I'm still going to pounce back on, you really have to know yourself in order to be able to do that and manage yourself outside of that.
Well,
So,
and keeping your ego in check doesn't mean you don't like to win. There's nothing
Absolutely.
wrong with winning, right? So don't get confused, because I hear people say, well, if I win, that's my ego. It's okay to win.
Carol, will you tell your marble story?
Do you want to hear my marble story? I had a lot of mentors in life, but in elementary school, I had a teacher, Mrs. Den, that watched out for me. And on this particular day, I was playing marbles, and I went up against mean-ass Herman. And Herman was a mean-ass, I'm sorry. But Herman, I took all of Herman's marbles. And when I took all of Herman's marbles, I, was headed back, and I kind of sneered at him and really made fun of him and headed back. Well, Herman was coming from behind me with one fist and grabbing the bag of marbles. And about that time, Mrs. Dens yelled, "Stop." And she took us both to her office, and she sat us down. And she said, "Herman, you are a sore loser, and you would never think of hitting anyone, let alone a woman." And then I'm over there just really having fun because Herman's really getting in trouble. And about that time, she looked at me and she said, "You're a sore winner, and you did not win appropriately." So she taught me a lot about beginning to win and lose. And so Herman and I learned to get along. She taught us also how to get along. And later we came together and stole everyone else's marbles.
Let me ask you this, Debbie. What's the difference between interpersonal skills and interpersonal skills, intra and inter? And is there a similarity between intra and interpersonal skills? Or anybody can answer this.
Sounds like a Carol question.
Hey, I talk too much. You guys, it's just not all about me.
Well, I'll let her answer that, but I just do want to go back
Go
to
back
that because I did have one comment to make.
Please.
I think, because I've heard that a lot in the past about women in leadership roles being intimidating to some people, and I've heard that from some of our employees, and so I'm very mindful of that. And for me, I walk around. I walk around all the time. I'm out and about. I go visit. I talk to everybody at every level, and I feel like my visibility is the most important way for them to see that I'm not intimidating. I'm one of them. I grew up in the organization. I've had 11 different jobs. I started at the bottom just like you, and I talk about that all the time. I talk about the different things I've learned. So for me, that's how I've tried to not be intimidating.
Thank you. What one, well, let's go back to intro. And Carol, you want to talk about intrapersonal and
You want to make this easy. I mean, internally, we're talking about inside again, and then in the interrelationships, and that's basically how I look at that. Is there anybody better at that answer than I am? They're really putting me on this.
If you had to give this audience one nugget of advice, what would that be? And I'd like you all to answer that. Carol?
If I had to give you one piece of advice, it would be to discover your why. I'm looking at a room. God made every one of us different, and you're extraordinary. Find your why and live it every day. Find something where you can make a difference in the work that you do. Find in your company, what one thing can I do every day that helps make this company better that I work for, or in your personal relationship. But find your why first, because your why is going to get you up and get you out of bed every day when things get tough.
Susan?
I'm going to switch it a little bit and kind of talk about leadership. And the one thing that I never want to give up in all my levels of progression is my integrity. And so I would tell you, never lose that. Make sure your standards are as high as they can be and elevate others up to those, but never lose who you are. Because a lot of times, or it really is, it's what do you do when nobody's watching?
Okay, mine's pretty simple. I'm going to give you two quotes. One's from my dad, and this is, they all know this. I shared this with them earlier, that he used to tell me as a teenager, and I never forgot. In fact, I made a sign out of it when I was in high school and had it on my wall for years. He used to tell me to make sure my brain is in gear before I engage my mouth. It's very encouraging of us to tell him what we thought, and we could disagree with him as long as it was respectful. But that I always needed to be thoughtful in my approach and what I said before I said it. That was a good thing to tell a teenager. My second one is a quote by Harry Truman that I've lived by for years. The first time I ever saw it, I thought, this is, if you're a leader, I think it's so important. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. And if you are that kind of leader, I really feel that your people will be inspired to not only follow you, but they will be inspired to give you their ideas and to be open-minded in their thoughts. And you're there as a leader to remove obstacles for them and to not be the star of the show. They're the star of the show.
Mine isn't nearly as profound, but it's been so beneficial to me. I'm an extrovert. I love to talk. I actually learned probably in the last 5 years that it's so much more important to listen. And the comment that I heard that has resonated with me, because I was doing it, and the question you have to ask yourself, am I listening or am I waiting to talk?
Thank you. That's great. When we were having a little time together at lunch today, Kathy was also very excited about something that she had heard, and all of a sudden somebody else said, and I'm not going to give your secret away, but, oh, that's a great idea, I could do that. And she said, and I can help. And she said, the one thing I don't know how to do is say no.
I'm working on that, though.
let me ask all of you what your favorite book is, and then it's time for us to wind up. Did you have a question? Absolutely. Please come up. They can give you the book later.
I'm battling a cold, so please forgive me. But I'm a very involved person. I am a student ambassador at Pensacola State College. I'm involved in 6 clubs, and I volunteer like all the time and do all this. But I'm just trying to figure out like how you guys manage your stress. Like, what do you do?
Did you all hear that? She wants to know how to manage your stress. All right, ladies.
Wow,
Go
has
ahead.
anybody figured that out?
Susan?
I will tell you that we book our own calendars for the most part. So are we doing it to ourselves? Yes, we will never, I'll live to be 100 because it's going to take that long to get everything done. But I have learned to make time for me, whether that's exercise or quiet time or whatever it is. So don't do it to yourself.
I schedule my quiet time. We have date nights. I've been married for 40 years. We have Wednesday night date nights. Because he's a professional and I'm a professional, we started losing track of that. And that not only affected our relationship, but it affected us as leaders, us as people. And so we scheduled it. And it's okay to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that evening. I have something else. They don't need to know that you're going to a movie or even that you're going to just to go to the grocery store and out to eat, but that you've scheduled it. So I would tell you, to be a good leader, you have to learn to say no. Because there is plenty out there to do and plenty that can pull you away. But if you let too much pull you away, you're never going to get very good at everything. You just can't. But if you don't take care of you, nobody else is.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Susan. You have to learn to say no. And I think as you get older, it gets a little easier because you're a little more confident as you get older to say no. And I think my extracurricular activities, which family, friends, my dogs, piano, and tennis, make me a better leader. If I have the time to do those things, I am much better at work. And I know, and I can tell, I can point right to it if I don't spend the time trying to balance that a little bit.
I do the same thing. You have to schedule you. If you don't schedule you, no one else is. And so exercise is really, really important for me. I don't know if you know, but I'm wearing this little, some of us around the office have these little jawbone things. That's my way of checking to make sure I get my number of walks in a day. 10,000 steps is my goal. But I can monitor myself, but also spending time with family and putting it on the calendar, and it's a non-negotiable. You know, when your family needs you, they need you. So you need to schedule you, and you can only do so many things well. So decide what those things are and do those really well. And sometimes you have to learn how to say no. You have a big heart. I know you because I'm on the board, and you're volunteering everywhere. But you do have to decide, how many things can I do? When you put something in a space, you're not doing something else. So think about that.
Thank you all very much. Now it's time for you to talk about the book that everybody should read, and then I'm going to wrap this up for a minute. And so we'll start with you, Carol. What's the book?
Well, those of you that know me, I worked in a bookstore from the 10th grade to the 12th grade, so I love books. I've got hundreds of books. But I love Simon Sinek, and Start With Your Why, and he's got another book out, Leaders Eat Last. But you can also go to YouTube and see his presentation. But begin with your why. This is powerful both for corporations and individuals.
My book is Primal Leadership, and it really relates to most of the things that we've talked about during this panel. I highly recommend it. It's a little advanced, but it does bring in a lot of the emotions and a lot of the things that we talked about today.
My book is an easy read. I like those. It's called The Customer Comes Second by Hal Rosenbluth, and he runs a big travel conglomerate. And the reason why I like that is because it is all about putting your employees first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your customers, your members, no matter what. And I read that many years ago, and I've read it 2 or 3 times since then.
I'm last, so I cheat. I have 2. One is the purpose-driven life. It helps me keep myself in check and remind myself that it is not about me. The second one is, it's a tiny read. I'm with Debbie on that. It's the Strength Finder. And the reason it's so good, it comes with a tool. And it is so relieving to know that we don't have to be good at everything. It helps us identify our strengths. And every good leader, we surround ourselves with people that are better than we are. So discover your strengths.
And I think what these ladies have done is they have shown you today that you have permission to be who you are, but you don't have an excuse not to manage yourself in an environment that's different than you. Let's thank these ladies.